Before I get started this morning, I want to make sure that I let everybody know that I have a new set of DVDs up here on the very front row. One of them is a Buzz Show, which is a local news edition of what Dad did when he found out that he had colon cancer. He went ahead and just aired it out there because with the kind of work that we do, he was just 100% sure that somebody within the Pentecostal realm or apostolic realm was going to call up and, finally say, okay, Johnny's finally getting what he deserves. The whole idea that you're not supposed to touch the Lord's anointed. That's what we've heard the whole entire time that we've been in Virginia, and now that Dad has come down with colon cancer almost 13 years into this kind of work, he was just certain that was going to come up. So he went ahead and got on the Buzz Show and went ahead and cut it off at the pass, if you will. And then we have a lesson that he presented in the Martinsville congregation dealing with church history. I encourage everybody to get a copy of that one because it definitely deals with one of the harder arguments that we have to deal with all the time, and that is who our founder is. Most individuals, when you come into contact with them and you discuss with them how that either John Smythe or different individuals started their churches at later dates, well, then they'll just automatically throw back at you, well, what about Alexander Campbell? And they try to make him our founder. We have done immense amounts of research, not only in our own history, but in Baptist histories and other Presbyterian histories and Episcopalian histories, to find this information to prove that, in fact, the Lord's church was actually here in the United States hundreds of years before Alexander Campbell even thought about crossing the Great Lake or the Great Ocean. So make sure you get that. And another one is just a few shows that myself and the other gentleman who's working with me in Danville, Mark McMinnis, have done on television. This morning, before we go into a lot of the information about what we've been doing in Virginia, I want to first encourage you to let you know how important you are and how important the work here in Royse City is. In 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 9 we read, "But ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, and holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light." This is a glorious office that we occupy. The fact that we now are a royal priesthood. And if you do a study on the priesthood, you find out exactly what your job is. You have a very important job here in the Lord's kingdom. Leviticus chapter 10, verses 8 through 10 tells us, "And the Lord spake unto Aaron, saying, Do not drink wine nor strong drink, thou nor thy sons with thee, when ye go into the tabernacle of the congregation, lest ye die. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations." Now here is our job. "And that ye may put difference between holy and unholy, and between unclean and clean." We have an obligation to point out error. We have an obligation to make sure that we are leading other individuals in the holy paths. But today, we find ourselves in a peculiar situation. Today, we find ourselves in a time frame where the mentality of, if you have individuals getting upset with your message, that you must be doing something wrong. That if you have people angry, agitated, wanting to get hostile with the fact that you're presenting the gospel to them, you may need to rethink the method that you're using. Well, this morning I plan to destroy that mentality, if it might be here, and help you also, that if you are coming into contact with individuals that have this mentality that you shouldn't be getting people mad and they shouldn't be getting upset with you and the fact that you're preaching the gospel to them, I want you to be able to overcome them also. But this morning, the problem that we're dealing with is found in this line of kings. 2 Kings chapter 12, verse 1, 2 Kings chapter 14, verse 2, 2 Kings chapter 15, verse 2. You find Joash, Amaziah, Azariah. In the 7th year of Jehu, Jehoash began to reign, and 40 years reigned he in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Zibiah of Beersheba. 2 Kings chapter 14. He was 25 years old when he began to reign, and reigned 29 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Jehoiadan of Jerusalem. Azariah, 16 years old was he when he began to reign, and he reigned 52 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Jechaliah of Jerusalem. But we still have one more. Jotham, 2 Kings chapter 15, verse 33, 25 years old was he when he began to reign, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Jerusha, the daughter of Zadok. Now, if you do a study on these kings, you're actually going to find that these were faithful kings. Every situation, you're going to read that each individual did what was right in the sight of the Lord. But they still had problems. If you go through and do the math on the amount of time that all these individuals reigned together, you count it up to 137 years. But what is it 137 years of? Well, if you continue to study, you find out that even though these kings and their families were doing what was right in the sight of the Lord according to the things that their fathers had done, each occasion you always find, but the people. But the people. Even though these kings and their families were doing righteously and were walking in the paths of the Lord, they were not using their influence. They were not taking hold of their responsibility to make sure the rest of the people were doing as they were supposed to do. In one situation, I believe it's this occasion here with Jotham, it actually says that the people did corruptly. Well, what's the point then? What is the point in you doing what's right, but yet you're not going to make sure that the people around you are doing what's right also? You find here that this is 137 years of compromise. 137 years that this line of kings just sat back and did absolutely nothing. If the people want to do corruptly, let the people do corruptly. Let's just think about this here for a moment. What's the fears? Well, if we tell them that they need to stop, well, they'll oust us. I'll lose my kingdom. Well, something far worse happened than that. 2 Kings chapter 16, verses 1 through 4, I believe, is on the slides. The next in line, in the 7th year of Micah, the son of Remaliah, Ahaz, the son of Jotham, king of Judah, began to reign. 20 years old was Ahaz when he began to reign, and reigned 16 years in Jerusalem, and did not that which was right in the sight of the Lord his God, like David his father. But he walked in the way of the kings of Israel, yea, and made his son to pass through the fire, according to the abominations of the heathen, whom the Lord cast out from before the children of Israel. It might have taken 137 years, but eventually the corruption influenced into his own family. The very next king is throwing his children into the fire, into a false god. Not only that, but in 2 Chronicles chapter 20 and verse 24, and Ahaz gathered together the vessels of the house of God, and cut into pieces the vessels of the house of God, and shut up the doors of the house of the Lord, and he made him altars in every corner of Jerusalem. The doors to the house of the Lord were eventually shut because of compromise. If you know anything about U.S. history and dealing with World War II, you may be somebody were to ask you who was Hitler's greatest ally, well, you might be thinking, well, it was Mussolini in Italy, or it might have been the Japanese over in Japan. But in actuality, if you really look at it from a different perspective, you look outside of the box, we were Hitler's greatest ally. With all the time that we remained neutral, with all the time that we decided, okay, we're just going to sit on the sidelines, Hitler was able to just ransack Europe. Had we not intervened before he had an opportunity to take England, everything would have been lost. Compromise is going to end up killing the church. Not willing to discuss, not willing to debate. And that's what everybody's saying today. You don't need to discuss that. What I believe is personal to me, my faith in Christ is a personal faith, it's private, therefore you need to leave it alone. That's not the case. If they are doing something that is corrupt, we have an obligation as the royal priesthood to make sure that they're walking down the right paths. 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 12 says, "Fight the good fight of faith, lay hold on eternal life, whereunto thou art also called, and hast professed a good profession before many witnesses." Does this sound like a pacifist mentality? On the very first phrasing, fight the good fight of faith. We are in a struggle. We are in a war. We are battling with Satan on a daily basis, but individuals today are telling us, no, you don't need to be like this. You don't need to be aggressive in your mindset as to, okay, I've got to overtake these individuals. But that is the mentality you need to have. If we do not gain this mentality, we're just going to continue losing ground. For Titus chapter 1, verses 9 through 11, holding fast the faithful word as he hath been taught, that he may be able by sound doctrine both to exhort and to convince the gainsayer. For there are many unruly and vain talkers and deceivers, especially they of the circumcision, whose mouths must be stopped, who subvert whole houses, teaching things which they ought not, for filthy lucre's sake. There are individuals, according to the Scriptures, whose mouths need to be stopped. But yet the majority of our brotherhood say, no, you need to be sweet about it. You need to be loving. You need to be kind. And pretty much take the Joel Osteen perspective of it and never mention sin again. We can't be that way. To not mention sin, to not let individuals know that they're doing something wrong, we are allowing them to subvert these houses. Just take them. Go for it. Have at it. We're not going to stop you. That's not the kind of people that we're supposed to be. We are supposed to be the people that are holding fast the faithful words, stopping their mouths in every opportunity that we have. And we are doing that in Virginia. Through television, through tent meetings, through the internet. Probably one of our greatest battlegrounds right now is topics. I wish I had kept my internet page up this morning, but unfortunately I had to shut down my computer every time I plug it up. But if I were to take you onto topics, you would be able to see the kind of influence that the Lord's church is having in Martinsville. If you get on Martinsville topics and just scroll through all the different topics that people are talking about, the majority of them are dealing with the church. Does baptism save you? Is there only one church? Johnny Robertson this, Johnny Robertson that, the Church of Christ this, the Church of Christ that. And some individuals, we have this saying that you can't see the forest because of the trees. Some individuals are wanting to get on topics and see all the bad mouthing that they're doing and wanting to say that this isn't a good thing. But I get on topics and see all these different things that people are talking about, and I look at it as we finally have them asking questions. A group of people that are usually just sitting in a pew, probably falling asleep on Sundays, but now they've got their Bibles out studying and are wanting to discuss. We're going to see in just a moment from some of our own old-time gospel preachers that getting people upset is not a bad thing. That we at one time actually used to praise individuals, used to mold ourselves after people that were getting people agitated and aggravated. But we've lost this kind of mentality. 1 Timothy 4:16, take heed unto thyself and unto the doctrine, continue in them, for in doing this thou shalt both save thyself, but not only thyself, and them that hear thee. You've got to spread it. You've got to talk about it. If you're going to save yourself and them that hear thee, you're going to have to get it out. You're going to have to broadcast. You're going to have to spread it. And the best way to do it, Jeremiah 6:16, thus saith the Lord, stand ye in the ways and see and ask for the old paths. Where is the good way? And walk therein, and ye shall find rest for your souls. But they said, we will not walk therein. This is exactly where we're at today. Our brotherhood is not wanting to walk in the paths that we used to walk in and where we used to have the greatest success. What is it that we're doing in Virginia? This is front page of the Buzz News. Does this man want to close your church? I know when Dad goes around and gives his presentation, he usually says, instead of having his picture up there, why don't you just go ahead and put a picture of Jesus up there if we knew what he looked like? And ask the same question. Would Jesus want to close all these denominations? Or all these false churches? Because really, you can't have a denomination of the one church. Of course he would. God isn't wanting all this division. God isn't wanting all this spread of confusion. This is what we're involved in Virginia. We are trying to get people back to the one true church. And we're not getting in people's face, and we're not poking them in the chest, and we're not yelling at them. We're not being ugly with them. But the information, after all, is this not a sword? And when you use a sword, what does it do? It cuts. And when you cut yourself, doesn't it hurt? Doesn't it make you mad? You smash your finger with a hammer, what do? Well, some individuals probably do some things they shouldn't do. But you get upset. It pains, it hurts. And that kind of reaction should not scare us. And we are having great success at shutting down these churches. This sign here, Double Anointed House of Prayer Ministry, Pastor Joe Neal. It's one of the newest ones to pop up in Virginia. Mark McMinnis stopped by there one day, talked to the preacher. The next day he drove by. There's a no trespassing sign on a church driveway. Can you believe that? A church putting up a no trespassing sign? This one here at the bottom, cameras of any type or any other devices capable of recording video or audio will not be allowed to enter the building. And then if we play this clip a little bit further, just see what the rest of the sign actually says. Backpacks and other large bags not allowed to enter sanctuary, no exceptions. Upon entering, you may be asked, I'm going to have to pause it, so I can't read that fast. You may be asked by security to view contents of bags. Such bags are subject to being asked to be returned to your vehicle. Thank you for attending. Security? Security. At a church building. What are they afraid of? They are afraid of the truth. They are now trying to hide their own messages. They don't even want their own stuff recorded. Because they know that if we come in, that they are liable to be put on TV, to be held accountable for what they actually say. That is what we're in the business of. We are in the business of making sure that these teachers, it's gotten to the point now where anybody can say anything they want to and not be held to it in any way, shape, or form. But in Virginia, you better watch what you say, because there might be one of our members in the crowd, and they just might be recording. And it's perfectly legal, no matter what they say. We've checked it out. We've done our homework. We've done our research. We're not doing anything wrong. They're just scared to death. Scared to death to the point where no trespassing signs, no recording, and then even when you catch individuals out in public. Going to do some adjusting. Start this again. Well, I know you're wanting to use the lapel, but I don't think you'll be able to hear it unless I plug in my... Because I want to make sure that y'all hear this point. These two are both Baptist preachers. They come from a long line of Baptist preachers. They're known as the Barbers. One of them preaches at one of the biggest Baptist churches in Danville, Virginia. And they were out here on the courthouse steps praying for rain because we were going through a little bit of a drought. We found out about it. We took our cameras. We went to discuss with them, and this is what we got.
I hope everybody heard that. You're not allowed to ask the pastors any questions today.
Nobody said that.
You just got it on tape right here. No.
He asked if it were anybody or just us. You said anybody.
You disturbing this meeting. I'm going to tell you don't talk about
Can we ask any questions? No, no questions. No, no questions. Is that just for us or for anybody? No questions. So then our cameraman then lets everybody know. I hope everybody heard that. The barbers are not going to take any questions from anybody. We didn't say that. You see what I mean about not being held accountable? They are so used to getting away with saying whatever they please that they just lied right there on videotape. We got on TV and held them accountable. Not only that, he ran like a little child to go get the police officer. This is a public area. We are acting upon our First Amendment rights just as you are. But they cannot handle the information that we bring, and they are scared to death. Brothers and sisters, this mentality is not something to be afraid of. This mentality gets results. This book is coming from a Presbyterian preacher. I mean, it's one thing when we read history and we read about our numbers from our own brethren. But when the enemy puts out information about the kind of success we were having, well, you can pretty much take that to the bank because they don't want you to know that anyways. But here we find, such was the zeal of proclaimers that they swept over Virginia, Kentucky, and the western country like a torrent, whole churches, both the Baptist, Methodist, occasionally declaring for them. And their progress has been onward ever since, swelling in less than 20 years to the number of 150,000 members and upwards. This is referring to Mr. Campbell. If you notice here at the bottom in the footnote, Mr. Campbell's forte is controversy. He has been a man of war from his youth. Controversy? A man of war, but yet 150,000 members. Controversy is a good thing. Controversy gets people shook up and gets them studying. Still referring to Mr. Campbell, same book. Its effect upon Baptist churches of the West and Southwest in particular had been divisive, adding to the problems created by the hyper-Calvinistic anti-missionary exponents. When the new denomination of disciples was formed, Baptists declared it heretical and separated themselves from it at great cost. In Kentucky, where the controversy, there's that word again, that everybody's afraid of today. You don't need to have controversy. You need to be peaceful. You need to be loving. Controversy took the greatest toll among Baptists. About 9,580 members were lost between 1829 and 1831. 2 years of controversy and almost 10,000 members. Controversy is a good thing. Still dealing with restoration history, this comes from another book, the Baptist Association, Baptist Churches in Virginia, 1833. More alarming was a threat from within. The religious movement, led by Alexander Campbell and reckoned by him a reformation of the church, has made itself felt in a number of churches. Campbellite views appear to challenge Baptist views. You mean you actually have an individual standing up and challenging preachers? Absolutely. How are you going to get results if you don't challenge somebody? How are you going to point out error if you don't discuss it? Of the doctrines of the church, baptism, and even the purity of the gospel as cherished practices of the church, the doctrinal integrity of the churches was being called into question, and noticed by who? And that by active and respected members of the churches. Mr. Campbell wasn't just pulling, the person who strolls in every now and then. He was pulling the deacons. He was pulling the elders. Active and respected members were beginning to question their own doctrines because of this controversy. Because of this amount of effort. They call it controversy, but really, there's nothing controversial about it. Mr. Campbell would come in, discuss with individuals, I'm sure, but things would get so heated because the other individual wouldn't be able to respond that it would look like it was controversial. Of course, it would be controversial on their end, but on ours, it's a peaceful event for the most part until the other individuals find themselves in something that they can't handle. In 1833, the Middle District followed the lead of the neighboring Dover Association of a year earlier when it resolved that this association will no longer recognize members continuing in the Painville or Chicopee Church of Christ attached to our order. Neither will we hereafter recognize any church holding in fellowship for any length of time persons maintaining the peculiarities of Alexander Campbell. 2 churches used to be members of the association but are no longer because they're now part of the Lord's body. A majority of the Painville Church was considered withdrawn. A minority group of that church organized the Union Church, which was received into the Middle District. 3 years later, the Chestnut Hill Church in Nottoway County was cut off by the Middle District in consequence of having identified herself with those who have embraced the peculiarities of Alexander Campbell. The Middle District also declined to seat fraternal delegates from the Marian Association because of prevalence of Campbellism and opposition to benevolent institutions manifested by churches in that body. Indeed, the Middle District suffered fewer losses to Campbellism than most of the neighboring associations. We're having great success during this time, all centered around controversy. 6 churches in the Marian went over to Campbellism. Marian fell into disorganization, was replaced by the Concord. 2 churches of the Dover Association joined the Campbell movement, and 6 others were seriously divided over Campbellism. 6 plus 2, that's 14 churches. 14 churches. And it's all stemming from a man who they said was controversial. I honestly don't think he was controversial. He was just zealous. He had a love for the Word. He had a love for God, and he was going to spread the truth as hard and as fast as he possibly could, standing up to any kind of opposition that would dare get in his way. Going a little bit further or closer into our history, this was actually from a book entitled Arkansas Angels. This individual is Joe H. Blue. I don't know if you can still get this book, but if you can, I greatly encourage it. Because when I'm feeling down and when I get to feeling upset with some of the things that they do say about us on topics, well, I just thumb through this book really quick. I see how the old-time gospel preachers used to do it, and I'm ready to go again. Mr. Blue, it is only natural that a man like Joe Blue would arouse the enmity and stir up the hatred of creed-bound sectarians who love not the truth and close their eyes to it. That's why they think we're controversial, and that's why they don't like us. It's because they don't want the truth. They are blinded, and they are in love with whatever it is they want, and they don't want to change. Their enmity has not always been manifested in a dignified manner. Brother Blue has been stoned, beaten with green walnuts, hit with rotten eggs, and on occasion, dynamite was placed under the pulpit where he was preaching. Through a kind providence, the fuse went out before it reached the explosive. All kinds of abuse has been heaped upon him, but he rejoices that he has been counted worthy to suffer shame for his name. You see, there used to be a time where people would study through these books, would read over these books, and praise these men. Try their best to mold themselves after their attitudes. But today, you try to do that, they'll think you're nuts. That's what they think about us in Virginia. They think we're crazy. They think we're radicals. But in the good old days, everybody used to be like this. Joe H. Blue was what one might call a very plain-spoken man. Many people thought him to be vituperative. His method of speaking for his church and the doctrine that he believed caused many to disapprove of his methods and to question his motives for using such biting language in the pulpit. But Mr. Blue believed that much error was being taught and practiced by the churches and that it would not be noticed by the majority of people unless someone let go with something strong enough to awake them from their lethargy. He believed that if people became angry at his preaching, that they would start searching their Bibles for the truth, and in this way, he would succeed in winning them to his cause. And I say amen, because I've seen it happen. We had an individual by the name of Jason Hairston. He used to be a Baptist, but upon seeing our TV program and hearing the information that Dad was presenting, he challenged him to a debate over baptism. When Jason began to study through the book of Acts and the book of Romans and other places where baptism is actually mentioned, the debate never happened. He studied himself out of the Baptist church, all because he got so upset with the message we were presenting, he came to the truth and began presenting the information for us. These kinds of methods is exactly what we need. Notice the kind of success that Mr. Blue had. When we were married, we had 6 members of the Church of Christ in the neighborhood. In the same neighborhood, we had a Baptist church, Methodist church, Holiness, and Presbyterians. But today, we have only the church in the neighborhood, and there has not been a sectarian sermon preached in the neighborhood in 35 years. Brothers and sisters, we need to get back to this method. We need to get back to this kind of zeal and this kind of output and this kind of fervency for the message that we have and for helping people to see that what they're doing is wrong. Now, I will agree that there's some methods in here that we would not be able to use. There's one Texas preacher. He had a Methodist individual stop him in the street and just badgering him. You think I'm going to hell because I'm a Methodist? You think I'm going to hell because I'm a Methodist? He looked him in the eye and said, no, sir, I don't think you're going to hell because the Bible teaches very plainly that babies and morons are safe. Now, we can chuckle at that. But at the same time, we understand that with people's mentality, that would just not work. But that's how it was, just plain spoken. When the Bible talks about individuals speaking boldly, another word that can be placed in there is frank. They just told it like it was. The apostles, when they were speaking boldly, they were speaking frankly. They weren't sugarcoating it. They weren't tiptoeing around. If you were in error, they would let you know about it. We need to follow these kinds of examples. After all, Jesus told His disciples, Matthew chapter 10, verse 16, behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Brothers and sisters, how do wolves act? I think this is something that is very often overlooked. The fact that He is already describing the kind of atmosphere that He is sending His followers into. You are going into a den of wolves. Ravenous. Agitated, aggravated. They don't want you there. And they will do what they can to get rid of you. But how are you supposed to act? Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. But beware of men, for they will deliver you up to the councils, and they will scourge you in their synagogues. And ye shall be brought before governors and kings for my sake, for a testimony against them and the Gentiles. But when they deliver you up, take no thought how or what you shall speak, for it shall be given you in that same hour what you shall speak. For it is not ye that speak, but the Spirit of your Father which speaketh in you. And the brother shall deliver up the brother to death, and the father the child, and the children shall rise up against their parents, and cause them to be put to death. And ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. But he that endureth to the end shall be saved. Jesus was preparing His disciples for what they were about to get into. You are going to be hated. You're going to be taken before councils, kings, and governors. Your own family are going to be the ones to deliver you up. What does that mean? That, we're supposed to cower back here in the shadows? Let's go ahead and just hem this thing in now? Well, of course they didn't act that way. The apostles in Acts chapter 5, doing many mighty works, having many believing and being added to the church. But then what happens? Leaders of the synagogues get indignation, is the word actually used. They become indignant at what the apostles are doing. They're thrown into prison. An angel comes and sets them free, tells them to go right back where they were and start preaching again. That's how we are supposed to be. When they want to act like wolves, we have to act like doves. And it's happened to us in Virginia. Dad has individuals take him by his clothes, threaten his life, threaten my mom. I've had individuals from child services come and interview me at school because somebody said that mom and dad were beating me and my little brother. I have individuals put their hands on me when I've gone into these places after being invited by one of their members because they couldn't answer us on TV and was 100% sure that their preacher could. When we got there and got their preacher to stammering all over himself, that's just the next thing that happens. When you cannot handle yourself mentally, you then go physically. And ladies and gentlemen, Jesus was warning us. Get ready for this. It's coming. If you do your job right, this is the kind of atmosphere that you're going to be living in. You are going to be in a fight. You're going to be in a war. And you need to do the best that you can. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15, but sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh you a reason of the hope that is in you, with meekness and fear. We put this on the denominational folk all the time because we go and try to ask them questions. They say that they're children of God, that they're following God, but yet they don't want to give any answers for what they do. Verse 16, having a good conscience, that whereas they speak evil of you, as of evildoers, they may be ashamed that falsely accuse your good conversation in Christ. For it is better, if the will of God be so, that ye suffer for well-doing than for evil-doing. I encouraged you a moment ago to get on the Martinsville topics and just see all the topics that are being brought up about the church. When you start going through and you start reading about all the ugly things that they want to say, just ignore that. Why are you getting so worked up? Because people are wanting to speak evil as of evildoers, but they're falsely accusing exactly what's going on. We need to go ahead and glory God and glorify Christ because we are suffering for well-doing. And Virginia is a mission field. We are working our hardest. Our population during the 2000 census, 7,078,515. The number of churches during this time, 1998, 155. And the reason why we have kept such old records is because we know the individual who made this National Directory of the Churches of Christ did a thorough job because he actually contacted Dad while we were overseas to get our location and to get our number of members. Now, if you're willing to get in contact with somebody who's out there in the middle of the Pacific, you can bet that he was doing a good job. 155 churches, if you do the math, 45,668 people to one church. We did a little bit more homework, and within a 100-mile radius of the city of Martinsville, there's over 35 Christian churches. Now, if you know anything about the Christian church, they used to be the Lord's church before they started going off. Within a 100-mile radius, there's over 35 Christian churches, which means at one time there were 35 churches of Christ within a 100-mile radius. But now you only have 155 in the whole entire state. We have been compromising way too long. We have lost so much ground, and that's what we're trying to do in Virginia and North Carolina. We are trying to take back ground that has been lost. We are working, we are struggling, we are doing our best to inform people of the error that they're in. And not only that, you have Baptist individuals and other individuals wanting to change history. This is how far they're willing to go, ladies and gentlemen. They will go to the point of even changing the facts of history to suit them. This is from a book called The Rise and Progress of the Baptists in Virginia, written by Robertson. If you notice, the Blackwater Church in Bedford and the Dan River Church in Pennsylvania, these are actual minutes from an association meeting. Both these locations, neither delegates nor letter was sent to the association. Well, this is Monday. On Wednesday, they met. Move that up. Wednesday, they met and proceeded as follows. The Church of Christ on Blackwater in Bedford. Bedford is right next door to Danville. Having sent neither letter nor delegate to this association, at the request of the association, Brother Samuel Harris and Brother William Lavelle are agreed to visit them and invite them to appear by their delegate at the next association. The Church of Christ on Dan River in Pennsylvania. I live in Pennsylvania County. The Dan River flows 2 miles south from where our church building is located. There used to be a strong location of the Lord's Church in Danville at one time. And if you notice the date on the other slide, 1771, Alexander Campbell wasn't here. Alexander Campbell was still over in Europe at this time. I'm not even sure if he was born yet. I'd have to rethink that. But still the fact remains, Alexander Campbell still had not yet set foot in the United States of America. But there's an establishment of the Lord's Church right there in Virginia. Sticking to the old past with our procedure, this is a letter to the editor. I don't know if Dad has done this before or not, but he has a tube that he carries around with him when he reports of months of back and forth in the letters to the editor. And if he were to roll it out, I'm sure that it would hit the back doors and might even exit the building. Months and months and months of individuals writing in the newspaper about the Lord's Church. Recently, I watched a television program titled What Does the Bible Say? With evangelist Johnny Robertson, in which he discussed the doctrines and beliefs of the Baptist Church. Well, how would he know exactly what church we're discussing? It's because we name names. We go ahead and speak very clear and very plainly, very frankly, exactly who it is we're talking about. Let's just think about it this way. If I knew that the McDonald's was using tainted meat in their burgers, but yet all I told you was, well, there's a restaurant in town that's using tainted meat in their burgers, would you think me a very good friend? Of course not, because you still have a huge chance of going to this establishment and getting sick. But if I go ahead and tell you McDonald's is using tainted meat in their burgers, well, you're going to be very thankful. Now, McDonald's may not like it, but of course they're the ones in the wrong. Nobody likes to be proved to be wrong. But we are very bold, very frank with what we're discussing. He was using a manual that stated Baptist theology, and it was pretty interesting. Near the end of his program, some folk called in to discuss what had been said, and it got heated at times. I must say that Mr. Robertson kept his cool very well. There's that situation of going in with wolves, but you remaining as doves. There were a couple of instances I don't know if I could have handled the situation as well. We used their own books. Because most of the membership in these churches don't even know that they have a manual they're going by. And then when you bring their manual on television and defeat it right there in front of them, we're going to see in just a moment that just some individuals are just flat out dishonest. They don't want the truth. They have other reasons for going to these churches. But notice what has this individual amazed. What most amazed me was that it took him so long to pry out of the two callers that, in fact, they indeed were Baptist. Showed you a moment ago the no trespassing and the Baptists not even wanting to answer questions. It's to the point now in our town that you can't get individuals to tell you where they go to church. If you are a member of the Church of Christ, either in Martinsville, Danville, Eden, or Ruffin, and you ask an individual where they go to church, they're not going to tell you. They won't even tell you what denomination they're a part of, lest we start opening up discussion with them. And they just don't want to go through that. Because they cannot stand to battle with the truth. I do not agree with a lot of John Robertson's doctrine, but I do appreciate the fact that he is bold enough to stand up for what he believes to be true, and he has people in this area reading the Bible and asking their pastors questions that have needed to be asked. That's Joe H. Blue. That's what we just read a moment ago from Arkansas Angels. He believed that you've got people angry enough and upset enough, they would begin to study their Bibles. And they will. Because they'll be hearing it, and they'll be hearing it, and they'll get so sick of it that they'll do whatever they can to shut you up. But they won't be able to do it. Because they are standing on a false foundation while we stand on the truth. And the truth cannot be defeated if you know how to use it. What we're working on. We have a new station. We're going into 2 states, Virginia, North Carolina. We're working in Martinsville, Danville, Eden, Ruffin, and in Reedsville. And wherever this circle is, all these other little towns, they're getting our television program as well. We're carrying DVDs. We're doing Bible studies. Within the 7 years that Dad has been in Virginia, the first 7 years, planted 4 congregations. We are up to 4 broadcasts a week, totaling up to 5 hours. 5 hours a week on TV, live call-in segments. You don't get that anywhere else. Well, you get a small taste of it with Ask the Pastor. I don't know if you've seen that or not. But you get to ask your one question, and then you hang up, and they answer it, supposedly. But with us, we stay on the line with individuals for 13 minutes discussing different things. Me and Cody Westbrook were up till 3 a.m. in the morning going over 1 John chapter 1, 7 through 10 with an individual in the Baptist church because he just couldn't get it. Finally, I think we were able to reason it through with him. 3 a.m. in the morning. Who else does that? Members of the Lord's church do that. Because we love the truth and we love the message and we love souls enough that we're willing to lose sleep so that you can gain your soul. Up till 3 a.m., and then we had to get back up at 8 a.m. to go door knocking the next day for our tent meeting. In 4 counties and 2 states, 10 towns, which is growing larger than that, over 150 baptisms and 4 denominational preachers during this time period came to the truth. That one star that you saw a minute ago in Ruffin, North Carolina, a man by the name of Levitus Nunley, he was a Methodist preacher, came to a tent meeting in Danville with John Shannon, heard the truth, obeyed it, and he's now teaching the truth out there in Ruffin, North Carolina. And if anybody knows John Shannon, you know he puts it just as plain as anybody. John does not play when it comes to telling individuals what they need to hear. Again, live call-in, live, October the 2nd. What does the Bible say? 276-658-2255. And we do it just like we're doing it here this morning. We have the green screen behind us. We're able to put our Bible scriptures, our PowerPoint, whatever it is we need, it's right there. Myself and this other gentleman, we are responsible for our own hour on Thursday evenings, every week. But now that Dad has colon cancer, is fixing to go through all kinds of treatments, we're going to be responsible for a whole lot more, I'm afraid. Not only are we involved in TV, but we do the old-fashioned tent meetings. Sean's been up to help us. Hopefully he'll be up to help us again. Danville in 2009, we had another group from Texas come up and help us knock doors. We knocked over 17,000 doors in the city of Danville. Handing out literature, telling them about the tent, inviting them to the tent, telling them about the TV programs we were doing that night. Danville again in 2010 knocked over 6,000 doors. We didn't have the same number of help, but still we got just about half of what we did the year before. Martinsville 2010, 8,000 doors. That is the whole city of Martinsville. Knew about the tent, knows about the location of the Lord's church, and knows about the TV programs. These individuals, when they stand on the day of judgment, will have no excuse. They will have no excuse. They will have no opportunity to say to any of us in the Lord's congregation, "You never told me about the Lord's church." And even though they may never come, and even though they may never obey, we will be justified because we put forth the effort, because we worked and we informed. Again, ladies and gentlemen, agitation, aggravation is a natural response being told that you have believed in error. It's just going to happen. This lady here, you probably heard this before, but it just makes the point.
You got a question?
Go ahead and say my name or my telephone number.
Okay, what's your question?
It's more than a question, it's a statement.
Well, I need the questions, but go ahead and give me your statement in 2 sentences and then ask your question.
Alright. That thing sitting beside you ain't nothing but a hypocrite. He's going to bust hell wide open. And why is he going around teaching this and teaching that when he better be teaching his own self how to go to heaven?
And see, in religion, people can just say anything. No facts, no proofs, just get on and say anything. Well, at least we say what we say.
Do you have a response to that man being saying you can just spit out anything? Is that, are you a Christian man?
Yes, I am. And I firmly believe in Jesus Christ, the Holy Ghost, and God Almighty. And I know I'm going to heaven when I leave this world.
Do you believe in judging?
I don't judge you. I hate you.
Would you say that again?
I said I hate you.
Thank you.
If I ever catch one of my kids in your church, I'll stomp a mud hole in them so deep, they'll never be able to get up and walk out.
I'd like to know what church you go to.
Man, what is it about Johnny that does this to you?
But yet she's a Christian, she loves Jesus, and she knows she's going to heaven. Even though she can't find her church in the Bible, nor can she give her salvation account from the Bible. But she knows it. The reason why she's upset is because we've presented the truth and it does not line up with what she knows. You may see just an angry person, but I see somebody who's been pricked. Something that has been said or that has been done has stuck with her to the point where she cannot deal with herself. And that's what has her so angry. In Acts chapter 14, verse 1 and following, we find, and it came to pass in Iconium that they went both together into the synagogue of the Jews. Now, if you want to look at it in today's terms, they went into a denomination. They went into an assembly of something other than what was being taught, the truth. And so spake that a great multitude, both of the Jews and also the Greeks, believed. But notice, here you have a great response. But the unbelieving Jews stirred up the Gentiles and made their minds evil affected against the brethren. Long time therefore abode they, speaking boldly or frankly in the Lord, which gave testimony unto the word of His grace, and granted signs and wonders be done by their hands. But the multitude of the city was divided, and part held with the Jews and part with the apostles. And when there was an assault made, both of the Gentiles and also the Jews with their rulers, to use them despitefully and to stone them, they were ware of it, and fled unto Lystra and Derbe, cities of Lycaonia, and unto the region that lieth round about. Now, brothers and sisters, if apostles are willing to get or go through the same reactions, why wouldn't we? Why are we so afraid to follow the same examples that the apostles have, or that the apostles have given us? After all, why was Jesus crucified? Well, of course He was crucified to die for our sins. But why did the Jews crucify Him? John chapter 7 says because they hated Him. Jesus, the Prince of Peace, King of Kings, Lord of Lords. You know, a lot of individuals, they have a messed up view on how Jesus really was. Sure, He was peaceful, and sure, He was loving. But He was one of the most despised individuals that ever walked into Jerusalem. Because He presented the truth. He showed the hypocrisy. He showed the corruption. And the individuals that are involved in that corruption, well, they'll do whatever they can to make sure that the light's not being shined on them. And ladies and gentlemen, error cannot stand to this kind of reasoning. There's a clip here where Dad is in a discussion with a lady, and she asks for the scripture where it says not to play a mechanical instrument of music. Dad then reverses the question to her, well, where's the verse where it says not to sprinkle? Does that mean it's okay? Well, she said no. Well, she just ruined her argument right there. If it's okay to use mechanical instruments of music because it doesn't say not to, then the Catholics are okay for sprinkling or for pouring because, after all, it doesn't say not to. Well, she got upset and told him to shut up. I then, when I started doing this work, we were invited to a revival, and that's actually the clip. My slides have gotten messed up. The clip there at the bottom, I used the exact same argument that Dad used with this lady, just a member, just somebody who sits in the pew. I used it on a Baptist preacher from Tennessee. And you know what he came to? When I finally hit him with that argument and he realized he was caught, he says, the Bible also says that you're not supposed to have doubtful disputations on the front steps of the porch. How do you like them apples? And turned off and walked away. I loved it. Because we put him on TV and showed him to be the coward that he is. A 21-year-old using argumentation. I hadn't even been to a proper school. I'm being taught by Dad and James Oldfield. He spent all kinds of time in seminary and all kinds of time in study. I don't know how old he is. But just that kind of simple argumentation has them running with their tail tucked between their legs. It's that easy. It is that simple. We just need to get that fire and that zeal put back in us from the old times, from the olden days. Don't be afraid of the agitation and aggravation. Don't let their evil speaking scare you when you're doing well, when you're working for the Lord. This morning as we close, if we could look at James chapter 1. And as you're turning there, I'll just go ahead and tell you what we're planning in the future. We have gotten Religious Review back on the air. If you've been keeping up with our programs, you know last year Religious Review was a huge hit. It was a 2-hour show during the day. We had 16 hours of Religious Review last year. This year we have Religious Review back on from 10:30 to midnight. Now, if you know TV, that's pretty much prime time. You're battling with individuals like Jay Leno and Conan and whoever else. But we have individuals watching us instead of watching them. 10:30 to midnight, and all we're doing is investigating and showing the corruption that's going on. One of our religious reviews, we had a lady from a Baptist church, one of the largest Baptist churches in Danville, get in touch with us because she was fornicating with a deacon in the Baptist church. She got in touch with us because they kicked her out of the church, but left him being a deacon. And then he went back on some of the deals that he had with her, and she was actually in the process of losing her house and losing her job. She was about to become homeless because of this man. And this Baptist preacher was just sitting by and letting it go. You don't think he straightened up when he knew we got a hold of it? Oh, he straightened up. He got on to this deacon. I think he still is a deacon, but anyways, at least he started acting right. When they know that they're going to be held accountable, fear runs through them. This individual got a TV program to try to answer us. That TV program did not last long, maybe just a couple of months. This individual, if you've been keeping up with the debates, A.C. Smith, he's a doctor, professor. During the debate, he said that there were literally thousands of verses that stated where an individual could be saved by faith only. The very next night, we played him back making that statement and asked him to show us just one. He then said, well, the previous night I used a bit of hyperbole. There are not literally thousands of verses stating saved by faith only in that manner. He may call it hyperbole, but that's just flat out lying. 3 months later, he left town. Gone. Never seen again. Ergen Cantor with Liberty University. Everybody know Jerry Falwell? Liberty University is 45 minutes north of Danville. I've been up there 3 different times. Ergen Cantor was the president of the theologian department there at Liberty. Was supposed to have a over-the-phone debate with Dad. He backed out. This is the head of the debate team at Liberty University. He was supposed to have a debate with Dad. I believe he was actually supposed to bring the whole debate team down to the tent one year. He backed out. Elmer Towns. He is now the president of Liberty University now that Jerry Falwell has passed away. We sat in his office with his secretary, recorded the phone conversation. We had a date and time set up for him to come on the show and debate. The date and time came. He never showed. No phone call, no letter. Just didn't show. Jonathan Falwell, Jerry's son. I've talked to him 4 different occasions. We tried to get him to come on the television program. Wouldn't come. These are the kinds of efforts that we are putting forth in Virginia. Why are we trying to get these big-name guys to come on the TV program? Is it to, inflate our ego? To inflate our prestige? No, it's not. When you take down big names like this, the average person looks at it and sees it and says, there's something going on here. When these kinds of individuals, doctors, and sons of great, supposed great preachers, won't come and discuss, there's something up. Something just doesn't smell right here. This individual, Billy Williams, was a Pentecostal preacher. He debated the young man that I told you a little while ago, the Baptist preacher that was going to debate Dad, but studied himself out of the Baptist church. Pentecostal, debating a former Baptist, got caught, said he could heal an individual, couldn't do it. That shook him to the core. He left preaching. He started driving trucks. A couple of months ago, he got back in touch with James Oldfield. They started studying. He's now a member of the Lord's Church in Eden. And I talked to him on Facebook last night, he's actually on his way to going back to preaching school to try and help get some of that false stuff out of his mind and get him back to knowing what the truth is. There is great success happening in Virginia, and we're looking for even greater success in the future. We're going back to Liberty University this year. We're having 2 different tent meetings this year. Sean, which I'll talk to you about that later. And again, religious review. More TV time. Doing our best to spread the message as much as we possibly can. Now, James chapter 1. Starting in verse 21. Wherefore, lay apart all filthiness and superfluity of naughtiness, and receive with meekness the engrafted word, which is able to save your souls. But be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. For if any be a hearer of the word, and not a doer, he is like unto a man beholding his natural face in a glass. For he beholdeth himself, and goeth his way, and straightway forgetteth what manner of man he was. But whoso looketh into the perfect law of liberty, and continueth therein, he being not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this man shall be blessed in his deed. This morning I encourage you not to just let this information go in one ear and out the other. I hope and I pray that you will hold on to this kind of information, that you will continue to support the work that we're doing, that you'll continue to get the DVDs and listen to the information, learn the information, study it, keep it, and use it. That you too can be spreading the gospel just as much as anybody possibly can. And that you also can be having the kind of success that we're having in Virginia. But most of all, that you'll be doing the work that Jesus said to do for His disciples, and that's just go out and teach. Go out and preach. Spread the seed. That you can be found faithful also. This morning, if there is anybody who is needing encouragement, needing of prayer, we ask that you come while we stand and sing.